A rabid baby called Judy Hopps walks through the forest at night, unaware that there is a huge tiger lurking to attack her. Suddenly, the feline attacks her, but luckily it's all just an act, because the truth is that in her town, the animals live in harmony with each other. In her village, a sheep no longer has to hide in the flock and can be an astronaut, just as jaguars can be auditors of justice instead of predators. On the other hand, Judy dreams of becoming a policewoman and wants to go to Zootopia, the big city where any animal can fulfill its dreams. The rabbit's parents believe that she shouldn't do anything too risky and encourage their daughter to become a carrot planter. While the adults are talking to her, the girl is distracted by a very suspicious orange fox. Judy decides to chase it and finds the animal stealing some little children. At the same moment, the rabbit demands that Gideon Gray return the children's tickets. In this way, the man advances on the young woman, but she is undeterred. This angers the thief even more, who pushes her opponent. Nevertheless, she kicks the fox hard in the face, which provokes a fierce counterattack. However, she manages to capture the tickets and returns them to the children. After this incident, Judy decides not to give up on her dream of becoming a policewoman. 15 years later, she's at the Zootopia Police Academy, where she has to pass several tests to become an officer. First, she goes through the hot sandstorm and a 300-meter fall, but ends up failing. Then there's the glacier wall climb, where Judy can't get a firm grip and falls. Finally, in the fight against one of the participants, she can't win either. The other day, while climbing the glacial wall, the young woman uses a box to jump over her opponents and overcomes the giant wall. What's more, the next fight is against an animal much bigger than her. So the rabbit jumps onto the ring ropes in order to gain momentum and land a powerful blow on her opponent. A few days later, at an appointment ceremony, Mayor Lionheart announces new police officer Judy Hopps, who is assigned to the city center, in District 1 of the Central Zone. Before the young woman leaves for the city, her parents give her some fox repellent and say goodbye. When Judy's train arrives in Zootopia, she comes across a place full of tunnels that pass between mountains with huge trees. Further into the city, there are buildings and technological structures surrounded by nature. Minutes later, Judy arrives at the Bangalore Tropical Lodging and discovers that she will be staying in a tiny room with noisy neighbors. The next day, she gets up at 5:30 a.m. and decides to take her fox repellent with her before leaving the house. On arriving at the police station, Judy is greeted by police officer Benjamin Clawhauser, who shows her the way to the chief's office. She enters the meeting room, where she meets her new work partners and discovers that the police station is full of huge beasts. The chief begins his speech by wishing one of the policewomen a happy birthday. After that, he distributes the tasks to everyone, and finally leaves Judy as traffic warden, which leaves her disappointed. At the same time, the rabbit asks to take over one of the crimes involving the disappearance of mammals, since she was the best in her class, but her boss won't grant her request. Instead, he challenges her to issue 100 fines a day, so Judy promises herself that she will issue 200 fines by lunchtime. That morning, the rabbit goes to her workplace and parks to hand out the tickets. Suddenly, a fox catches the attention of the other cars in the street, and the officer begins to chase it. Judy then goes into an ice cream parlor, where she comes across the fox saying he wants to buy a popsicle for his son. However, the attendant doesn't want to sell anything to the two of them, so the officer interrupts him and convinces the receptionist to sell the ice cream. However, the foxy father, who is called Nick Wilde, says he won't be able to buy it because he forgot his wallet. Judy decides to pay for the ice cream for the child and says goodbye to the family. The next day, the officer finds the baby and notices that it is carrying some jars with something red in them. Then she comes across Nick on top of the roof and he slips down a trail of defrosted ice cream. Later, the rabbit chases them to a snowy spot. The two foxes pour the melted ice cream into molds and then turn them into little paw-shaped popsicles, which are sold to rodents. The animals throw the sticks in the trash and the pair of crooks collect the wood to sell again. Afterwards, Nick hands over the payment to his partner, who is called Finnick. At the same time, the policewoman questions the fox, who deceives her by drawing her attention elsewhere and flees. However, Judy manages to find it and accuses it of practicing illegal services. During the conversation, Nick offends the officer, who only now realizes that she is inside a concrete tank. As a result, she is trapped and can no longer pursue the man. The next day, the rabbit is booed by all the citizens as she goes about her work. She is then interrupted by a pig who has just had his store stolen by a weasel. She immediately runs after the thief, who dodges giant animals and runs under a police car. The fugitive comes up against a wall and throws the stolen cargo over the gate and through a narrow hole in the ground. Then Judy also manages to get over the wall and they both arrive in a mini city of small animals. The thief uses the cars as skates to escape, but knocks over several buildings that fall towards Judy. Even so, the policewoman manages to hold the structures up with her own legs and save the citizens around her. Soon after, Judy stops on a train track and the man passes her while hitching a ride on the locomotive. He dodges a few obstacles along the way, but doesn't realize that the rabbit is just ahead, so she manages to catch him and throws him away. Before Judy can stop him, the thief throws a giant donut in her direction, but she manages to dodge it. However, the food is heading towards a citizen, so the policewoman has to act quickly to save her and finally manages to successfully capture the thief. Upon arriving at the police station with the culprit, Judy is accused by her boss of abandoning her job just to return onions to a shopkeeper. Faced with the situation, the young woman demands that he change her position, since she hasn't wanted to issue fines since she started her new job. Just then, Mrs. Otter bursts into the room to say that her husband has been missing for more than 10 days and asks the captain if there is anyone available to find him. Judy replies that she will look for the animal. Chief Bogo asks the woman to leave the room for a few minutes and fires the rabbit for insubordination. As a result, she has to tell Mrs. Otter that she won't be able to help with her husband's case. However, when the policewoman opens the door, they run into the town's deputy mayor, who has already told the mayor that Judy is on the missing persons case. This leaves Bogo with no choice but to give the rabbit 48 hours to find the missing civilian. On the other hand, if she can't solve the case, she'll have to resign from her post at the police station. Looking at the case file, the rabbit discovers that there are no clues apart from a photograph and realizes that Nick is also in the picture. Later, the policewoman seeks out the fox, who refuses to talk to her because he needs to earn money in his job. So Judy decides to fine him for tax evasion and forces the criminal to help her with the case. Hearing everything in the baby carriage, Finnick mocks his partner and leaves him alone with the policewoman. Together, they go to some kind of temple to find an old buffalo called Yax, as Nick believes he may have some information about the case. Seeing the photo of the missing animal, Yax says he knows his yoga instructor. Opening a giant door inside the salon, Judy comes across some kind of spa where everyone relaxes without clothes, as the place is frequented by naturalistic animals. They talk to the yoga instructor, who claims she knows nothing about Mr. Otterden. Suddenly, Yax remembers that the missing man was wearing a knitted sweater and new velvet pants. What's more, the buffalo says that he got into a white car with chrome wheels and gives a description of the license plate. However, Judy can't check the number because she's not yet in the police system, so she asks Nick for help, since he's a delinquent and knows a lot of animals. The pair go to the traffic department, where all the attendants are sloths. The receptionist does his job slowly, which makes the rabbit desperate. When she finally gets the origin of the sign, she rushes to Trundleland and realizes that it's already dark. However, even without a warrant, the rabbit breaks in. Soon after, they break into the limousine, where they find bare hair, claw marks on the back seat and the wallet of the missing animal. When he comes across a glass with the initial B engraved on it, the fox realizes that the vehicle belongs to Zootopia's biggest crime boss, known as Mr. Big. At the same moment, Nick tries to escape, but is surrounded by two giant bears who capture him and put him in a car. The truth is that the fox knows the big boss, because he tried to sell him a very expensive carpet that was actually made of skunk fur. When he arrives at the man's office, an even bigger animal appears and places a Minnie Mouse on his desk. Seconds later, Nick apologizes to him and kisses his hand. However, the policewoman reveals that she followed the leads of the case to Mr. Big's limousine and that he is the main suspect because of this. Faced with the situation, the boss orders his henchmen to throw Judy and the fox onto the ice, which can be accessed through a hidden passage in the ground. However, the bandits are interrupted when the boss's daughter enters the room and recognizes the policewoman, as she saved her from the giant donut. The mouse then prevents the two from being thrown and convinces her father to help them. The boss said that Otterden was his florist and wanted to tell him something important, so Mr. Big sent a vehicle to pick him up. However, he went crazy in the car and attacked the driver before fleeing. Afterwards, Judy goes to a tropical forest to look for the attacked employee, Mr. Staines, who is spying through the door of her house. The injured animal says that Otterden became wild and destroyed everything inside the limousine. Judy asks the driver to open the door, but before he can do so, an ominous noise comes from inside the house. The jaguar begins to transform into a wild animal and advances towards the pair, who run away and jump off the bridge outside. They then run into a giant tree trunk. Quickly, Judy asks her friend Benjamin at the police station for backup. The pair of fugitives find a cable car, but the policewoman slips and the jaguar catches up with them. Nick returns to look for his friend, but the enemy appears and advances on him. Before the fox can be attacked, the policewoman manages to catch the man and stop him by tying a chain around his foot. Even so, his opponent tries to advance and Nick gets scared, which causes him to fall over the cliff with the rabbit. However, they both manage to grab onto a vine that leads them to a makeshift hammock, but the structure breaks and they fall once again, being saved by a vine before crashing to the ground. After police reinforcements arrive, Judy prepares to show the rabid jaguar to Bogo, but the animal has disappeared. He asks for the rabbit's badge and Nick says she won't give it back, as she's on a case that no experienced policeman has ever solved. On the way to the city, the fox has the idea of looking at the traffic cameras, so they look for Deputy Mayor Bellwether. The sheep leaves the pair of friends alone and they watch the camera footage, then realize that Mr. Manches has been captured by wolves. Through the video, Judy follows the path the criminals took, which indicates a fortress on the edge of a cliff outside the city. After arriving on the scene, the policewoman howls to distract all the wolves, who start howling back, and so the pair manage to break into the hideout. Inside, there are several stretchers, an operating room, and claw marks on the floor. In the middle of the silence, a rabid tiger jumps out of a cage next door, which frightens the investigators. At this point, they realize that there are dozens of cages with wild animals and the police officer finds Mr. Otterton in the same rabid state as the other animals. There are 14 animals on the premises, which indicates that all the missing people listed in the police station's announcement are being held there. Suddenly, someone enters the room, and Judy and Nick come across the mayor arguing with the scientist. The researcher says that all the animals have gone mad because they are predators and the policewoman records the whole conversation, including when Lionheart says that no one in the population can know about it, because he is a lion and subject to the effects of the plant. Suddenly, Judy's phone rings, alerting the mayor that someone has broken in, so the two friends leave and hide in one of the rooms. Then the wolves appear, forcing the pair to flee through the toilet and fall straight into the sea. Hours later, Chief Bogo is interrupted by the receptionist, who informs him that the rabbit has found all the missing people, leading to the mayor's arrest. The next day, the police commander organizes a press conference and Judy is invited to give a speech. When she goes on stage, the young woman is surprised by several questions about the case and replies that only predators can become wild, because the only thing in common between them is a substance in their DNA. She also tells them that in the past, predators survived thanks to their wild instincts to hunt other animals. At this point, the fox looks at the images on the big screen and begins to remember his past. When Judy returns to Nick, he wonders if the rabbit is afraid of him, since he is a predator. The animal realizes that she is ready to defend herself against him at any moment, so he leaves hurt. Before Judy can go after her friend, the press interrupts her again with more questions. A few days later, the city is in chaos as several attacks are reported. In addition, the predators hold protests due to the offensive accusations spread among the citizens. At the police station, Benjamin packs his things, as he has been transferred from the reception to the storeroom in the basement, because he is a predator and could be a threat. The next day, Chief Bogo recommends clothes for the rabbit that will be on the cover of a magazine, but she's not happy because she's ended up dividing the animal world. Before the rehearsal is over, she hands in her badge and returns to the farm, where she goes back to selling carrots with her parents. Suddenly, Gideon Gray arrives on the scene in his car full of cakes and pies. He's become a successful confectioner and a great dealer for the rabbit's parents. While watching the children, the fox talks about a plant called the howler, which Uncle Terry ate when he was a child and turned him wild. At that moment, Judy realizes that this plant is responsible for turning the predators wild and takes the car key to return to Zootopia. When she arrives in town, the young woman knocks on Finnick's door looking for Nick and tells him the whole truth, but the fox ignores her. Then Judy starts to cry and apologizes to her friend. Hurt, Nick doesn't answer her, but when he turns to her, he shows her that he was recording the whole conversation, which embarrasses the rabbit. Soon afterwards, the pair go after Duke, the king of piracy whom the policewoman chased for stealing onions. The weasel refuses to talk about the howling plants, but changes his mind when Mr. Big's henchmen capture him and threaten to throw him on ice. The animal then confesses that it stole the howling plants in order to sell them to Doug and says that he is dangerous. Upon hearing this confession, Judy and the fox go to the buyer's hideout, where they find a laboratory full of growing plants. Suddenly, an animal enters the room and picks up a bucket of howling plants, which become liquid after passing through a system, resulting in a small capsule. At that moment, the ram answers the phone and says that a cheetah in the square is an easy target, as he has already hit an otter in a moving car. When the man opens the wagon door, Judy pushes him out and closes the lock, so that the pair of friends are trapped inside the laboratory. Nick quickly grabs a briefcase to take the evidence to the police department, but the officer has the idea of driving the train car there. However, she doesn't realize that the bandits have just boarded the locomotive. One of them manages to get into the corridor and headbutts the door, but the fox manages to close it. However, another animal emerges from the back door and tries to grab the two partners, so Nick opens the other passage just as the man is running towards them, which causes him to hit the other opponent. At that moment, the enemy grabs Judy, but she manages to hold onto its horn while the other one runs in front of the train and is forced to flee to the side, where its belly is scraped by the locomotive. The scientist throws Judy onto the train, so she has to dodge the obstacles. Once the train is out of the tunnel, the officer notices another vehicle coming towards them and asks the fox to speed up. She then pushes her opponent towards a device on the track, which causes them to change course. In this way, the wagon enters an adjacent track, which is blocked. At this point, the locomotive loses control and they jump out of the vehicle, which crashes, causing a huge explosion. After the accident, Judy regrets having lost all the evidence. However, Nick manages to save the suitcase and they make their way to the police station. Along the way, the deputy mayor finds them and asks the pair to hand over the suitcase. Judy then begins to suspect Bellwether, since she found them so easily. The policewoman refuses to hand over the suitcase, then realizes that the sheep's henchman is after her. So Nick and Judy decide to run away, but the rabbit stumbles and ends up hurting her leg. While Nick gives his partner a quick bandage, his pursuers get closer and closer. When the deputy mayor finds the shadow of a rabbit, she asks her henchmen to check it out, but they only find a doll. On the other side of the place, the fox runs away with Judy in his arms, but the bandits catch up with both of them and throw them into a hole in the ground. At that moment, the suitcase falls near Bellwether, who steals the object and shoots the liquid at Nick, which causes an instant transformation in the fox. Immediately, Judy runs away and the predator attacks a stuffed animal that is in its way, but continues to chase her friend, who is trapped. At this point, he grabs the rabbit's neck, but the attack is just an act, as the fox has exchanged the serum in the deputy mayor's gun for blueberries. Even so, the sheep claims that there is no evidence against her, but Judy shows her that she recorded everything the woman said about shooting the serum at the predators of Zootopia. So Bellwether is arrested and Mr. Otterton can return to his family. After helping Judy conclude the case, Nick decides to give up the criminal life and become a policeman. At the time of the distribution of tasks to the policemen, Chief Bogo announces that Judy and Nick will be traffic wardens, which leaves them disappointed. However, it turned out to be just a prank, as the pair had to answer a call about a car race. Soon after, the two friends chase a car at full speed, and when they manage to stop it, ironically discover that the driver is a sloth.